The doorbell at Cafe Aurora rang at 8:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in downtown Boston. But it wasn't the familiar chime that made Kayla Santos freeze in the middle of wiping down table 3. It was the absolute silence that followed, the kind of silence that settles over a room when something fundamental shifts in the air. 5 men in black suits had just stepped through the entrance of the small neighborhood restaurant. The morning light caught the edges of their expensive tailoring, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. The tension was so thick, so palpable, that even the sizzling sound from Rosa's frying pan in the kitchen seemed to stop mid-crackle. Kayla Santos, 29 years old, stood near the window booth with a damp cloth still in her hand. Her dark eyes lifted slowly, taking in a sight she would replay in her mind for years to come. 4 massive men, clearly professional security guards, stood in a perfect square formation around a 5th man. He was older, gray-haired, distinguished, carrying an expensive leather briefcase that probably cost more than Kayla's monthly rent. His eyes swept across the modest cafe, past the faded photographs on the walls, past the regulars nursing their morning coffee, until they landed directly on her. The man's expression was unreadable. Not cold, exactly, but not warm either. Just focused, intensely focused. "Are you Miss Kayla Santos?" His voice cut through the silence with the practiced authority of someone used to being heard. Kayla's heart began to hammer against her ribcage. Her mind raced through a dozen terrible possibilities in the span of a single breath. Problems with the law? Had someone filed a complaint? Her mother's medical debts, had they finally caught up? That overdue parking ticket from 3 months ago? She nodded, her throat suddenly too dry to form words. The cloth slipped from her fingers and landed softly on the table. The entire restaurant had stopped pretending not to watch. Rosa stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, spatula still raised. Wim, her boss, a portly man in his 60s who'd owned the cafe for 30 years, had emerged from behind the counter, his face etched with concern. The handful of early morning customers sat motionless, coffee cups suspended halfway to their lips. "My name is Dr. Jonathan Hamilton," the man said, taking 3 deliberate steps toward her. "I'm the senior attorney for the Whitmore family estate. I need to speak with you immediately about Mr. Robert Whitmore." The name hit Kayla like a physical blow. Robert, the quiet old man at table 7. The man who had been coming to Cafe Aurora every single morning for the past 2 years. The man who always arrived at exactly 7:30 a.m., winter or summer, rain or shine, who ordered the same thing every time: black coffee, no sugar, and 2 slices of whole wheat toast with just a touch of butter. The man who never said more than a whispered, "Good morning," and "Thank you," but whose eyes held a depth of loneliness that Kayla recognized because she'd seen it in her own mirror on too many nights. The 78-year-old man she had quietly come to care about, though she couldn't explain exactly why. "Is he?" Her voice cracked. She swallowed hard and tried again. "Is he okay?" Dr. Hamilton's expression softened, just slightly, just enough to confirm her worst fear before he even spoke the words. "Mr. Whitmore passed away last night, peacefully, in his sleep, at his home in Beacon Hill. I'm very sorry for your loss." He paused, studying her face with an intensity that made her feel exposed. "He left very specific instructions regarding you, Miss Santos. Very specific." Kayla felt the floor tilt beneath her feet, the edges of her vision blurred. Robert was gone. The old man, whose hands trembled so badly some mornings that she'd taken to quietly cutting his toast into smaller pieces without making a show of it. The man who always left exactly $2 as a tip, more than he could probably afford, judging by his worn jacket and carefully mended shirts, but which she always accepted because she understood that giving was important to him. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears she didn't bother to hide. He was a good man." "Yes," Dr. Hamilton said quietly. "He was. Which is precisely why we're here." He glanced around the cafe, at all the watching faces, then back to Kayla. "Miss Santos, this is not a conversation we can have here. You need to come with us now. To our offices downtown." Wim stepped forward, his protective instincts overriding his usual deference to authority. "Now, wait just a minute. Kayla hasn't done anything wrong. You can't just—" "Mr. Decker, I presume?" Doctor, Hamilton's tone remained professionally courteous. I assure you, Miss Santos is not in any trouble, quite the contrary. But we must insist she accompany us immediately. Mr. Whitmore's final wishes were extremely clear on this matter, and there are other parties involved who are waiting. The way he said that last word, waiting, carried an undercurrent of something Kayla couldn't quite identify. Warning, urgency, both. It's okay, Whim, Kayla heard herself say, though nothing felt okay. She untied her apron with trembling fingers, folded it carefully, a habit born from years of making small gestures of order in a chaotic life, and set it on the chair. I'll be back soon. She had no idea if that was true. She had no idea about anything anymore. As she walked toward the door, flanked by men whose presence seemed to fill the entire space, Rosa caught her eye from the kitchen. The older woman's face was creased with worry, but she nodded once, a small gesture of solidarity that Kayla desperately needed in that moment. The morning air outside was crisp, almost cold. October in Boston carried the promise of winter in every breath. A black Mercedes SUV sat at the curb, its engine running, looking absurdly out of place on this street of modest shops and aging brownstones. One of the security guards opened the rear door. Dr. Hamilton gestured for her to enter first. Kayla climbed into leather seats that probably cost more than everything she owned. The door closed with an expensive, solid thunk that seemed to seal her off from the life she'd known just 10 minutes ago. As the vehicle pulled away from Cafe Aurora, Kayla pressed her hand against the tinted window, watching her small corner of the world recede. She thought about Robert sitting at table 7 just yesterday morning. How he'd smiled, actually smiled, when she'd remembered he liked his coffee extra hot on chilly days. She hadn't known it would be the last time she'd see him alive. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. Dr. Hamilton sat across from her, his briefcase balanced on his knees, watching her with that same intense, evaluating gaze. Miss Santos, he said, quietly as the city slid past outside. I want to prepare you for what's about to happen. The next few hours are going to be difficult. The Whitmore family is not what you'd call welcoming, and when they see you, when they understand why you're there, they're going to say things, terrible things. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Kayla turned from the window to meet his eyes. Because I'm black. It wasn't a question. Dr. Hamilton's jaw tightened. Because you're black. Because you're young. Because you worked as a waitress. Because they can't fathom that their father would. He stopped himself, shaking his head. I shouldn't be telling you this, but I've been the Whitmore family attorney for 15 years. And I've watched Robert become increasingly disappointed in his children. What he's done, what you're about to discover, is going to shake their world too. Its foundation. What did he do? Kayla's voice came out smaller than she intended. Dr. Hamilton smiled, then a real smile, the first she'd seen from him. He recognized true worth when he saw it. And he decided to do something about it. The SUV turned onto Commonwealth Avenue, heading toward the gleaming towers of Boston's financial district. Toward a world Kayla had only ever seen from the outside. Toward a truth that would change everything. Robert Whitmore hadn't been just a lonely old man nursing black coffee at a neighborhood cafe, and Kayla Santos was about to discover that, sometimes, the universe pays attention to small acts of kindness in ways that seem impossible until they happen. The law offices of Hamilton, Chase and Associates occupied floors 28 through 30 of one of Boston's most prestigious buildings. Marble floors stretched in every direction, polished to a mirror shine that reflected the autumn light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Dark wood paneling spoke of old money and older traditions, the view alone spanning the Charles River, Cambridge beyond. The city sprawling in every direction probably cost more than Kayla's annual salary. She felt impossibly small walking through those silent corridors, her worn sneakers squeaking softly against the expensive flooring. Each squeak seemed to announce her presence, seemed to say, outsider, intruder, someone who doesn't belong here. This way, Miss Santos, Dr. Hamilton said, guiding her with a gentle hand near her elbow. Not touching, not presuming, but present, protective, somehow. They stopped before a set of heavy double doors. Dark wood, brass fixtures that gleamed with age and care. Dr. Hamilton paused with his hand on the handle. "They're already inside," he said quietly. "Remember what I told you. No matter what they say, you are here because Robert wanted you here. You have every right to be in that room. More right than they do, truth be told." Before Kayla could ask what he meant, he pushed open the doors. The conference room beyond was designed to intimidate. A massive table that could seat 20 dominated the space, surrounded by leather chairs that looked like thrones. More windows, more impossible views, and seated at the far end of the table, arranged like judges at a tribunal, were three people who looked at Kayla's entrance with expressions ranging from cold curiosity to barely concealed contempt. Victoria Whitmore sat in the center chair with the bearing of someone born to occupy important spaces. She was 50, maybe 55, with the kind of cold, preserved beauty that came from decades of expensive maintenance. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a style that probably had a French name. Her navy suit was impeccable, tailored, the kind you couldn't buy off a rack. Diamonds glinted at her ears and throat, understated but unmistakably real. She didn't look up when Kayla entered, just continued, studying the document in front of her, as if a stranger's arrival was beneath her notice. To her right sat a younger man, late 20s, maybe 30, who had to be her son. Bradley Whitmore wore a suit that probably cost $3,000. His dark hair was styled with that careful casualness that takes both money and effort. He looked at Kayla with an expression she'd seen too many times before, the look of someone examining something they didn't quite understand and didn't care to. His eyes traveled from her face down to her sneakers and back up again, taking inventory, finding her lacking. The third person was a young woman, blonde, beautiful in that generic way of people who've had professional help, who sat beside Bradley with her hand possessively on his arm. The girlfriend or wife, Kayla assumed. She wore the expression of someone playing a supporting role in someone else's drama. "Is this the person?" Bradley's voice carried across the room before Kayla had taken 3 steps inside. He said it the way someone might say, "Is this the problem?" or, "Is this the mistake?" "Bradley, please." Dr. Hamilton's tone held a warning, but Kayla noticed that even the lawyer seemed uncomfortable with her presence, as if she represented a disruption to the natural order of things. "Have a seat, Miss Santos." Dr. Hamilton gestured to a chair that sat isolated on the opposite side of the table. Apart. Alone. Facing the family like a defendant facing a red jury. Kayla sat, trying to ignore how the leather creaked beneath her. Trying not to think about how her Cafe Aurora uniform pants and simple blouse looked under the room's recessed lighting. She folded her hands in her lap to stop them from trembling. Dr. Hamilton positioned himself at the head of the table, opening a thick folder with practiced efficiency. "We're here for the formal reading of Robert Whitmore's last will and testament, properly witnessed and notarized, filed with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts 3 months ago." 3 months? Victoria's head snapped up. This was apparently news to her. Daddy changed his will 3 months ago and didn't tell us? Mr. Whitmore was under no legal obligation to inform you of changes to his personal estate, Dr. Hamilton replied evenly. And given the circumstances, he chose to maintain his privacy. "What circumstances?" Bradley leaned forward, suddenly alert. "Mr. Whitmore was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer 3.5 months ago. The prognosis was 6 months or less. He chose not to pursue aggressive treatment." The silence that followed was cold and complete. Victoria's face remained expressionless, but something flickered in her eyes. Grief, guilt, relief. Kayla couldn't tell. Bradley just stared. He had cancer for 3 months, and he didn't tell his own family. That was his choice, Dr. Hamilton said. A choice he made deliberately and with full mental capacity. I should add. Multiple doctors can attest to his clarity of mind throughout his illness. He opened the folder fully, pulling out several documents. Mr. Whitmore left very specific instructions for how this reading should proceed. First, the distribution to his immediate family. Kayla saw Victoria and Bradley exchange glances finally, getting to the important part, to his daughter, Victoria Ann Whitmore, and his grandson, Bradley James Whitmore, to be divided equally. The Beacon Hill residence and all its contents, including the art collection currently valued at approximately $12 million, the summer residence in Martha's Vineyard, the winter residence in Palm Beach, all personal vehicles, and a trust fund in the amount of $50 million. The numbers hit Kayla like physical blows. $50 million, $12 million in art. She couldn't even properly conceptualize that kind of money. Her entire life, her mother's life, her grandmother's life, they could have lived comfortably for generations on a fraction of that amount. Bradley visibly relaxed, settling back into his chair. Well, at least the old man didn't completely lose his mind. Victoria allowed herself a small smile. These arrangements seem appropriate. However, Dr. Hamilton continued, and Kayla noticed his tone shift slightly sharper, more formal. There is a second section of the will that pertains to Mr. Whitmore's business interests. This restaurants, Victoria said dismissively. Fine, Bradley and I can manage the transition. The Whitmore Holdings restaurant chain, Dr. Hamilton interrupted, his voice rising slightly to cut through her assumption, consisting of 47 establishments across 6 states: Massachusetts, New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, and Vermont, along with the Central Distribution Center, all supplier contracts, all real estate holdings, and all related commercial assets. He paused, letting the weight of the assets sink in. Then he turned his gaze directly to Kayla. Are left, in their entirety, to Miss Kayla Marie Santos. The words hung in the air like something solid and strange. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then Victoria laughed. It was a harsh, sharp sound, completely devoid of humor. I'm sorry, what? The business holdings, Dr. Hamilton repeated calmly, are bequeathed to Miss Santos, along with an operating fund of $15 million earmarked specifically for restaurant improvements, expansion, and employee welfare programs, all under Miss Santos's complete and sole discretion. Bradley's face had gone from relaxed to red in the span of a heartbeat. That's impossible. That's insane. She's a waitress. She was an employee at one of your grandfather's establishments. Yes, Dr. Hamilton acknowledged. One we didn't even know he owned. Bradley exploded, standing up so fast his chair rolled backward. Dad bought that little dive years ago as a tax write-off. We had no idea he even went there, let alone that he was befriending the staff. Victoria remained seated, but her knuckles had gone white where she gripped the edge of the table. When she spoke, her voice was controlled, but barely. Dr. Hamilton, this is clearly a mistake, or a temporary lapse in judgment on my father's part. He was ill, you said so yourself. Cancer patients are often given strong medications that affect their thinking. Mr. Whitmore's mental competency was evaluated by 3 independent physicians specifically to prevent this kind of challenge, Dr. Hamilton said. All 3 certified that he was of sound mind and acting of his own free will. Their reports are part of the legal record. He pulled out another document. Furthermore, in addition to the business assets, there are very specific instructions about management structure, board appointments, and, he looked at Kayla, a personal letter for you, Miss Santos. With trembling hands, Kayla accepted the envelope. Her name was written across it in shaky but clear handwriting. Robert's handwriting. Read it aloud, please, Dr. Hamilton said gently. Mr. Whitmore requested that you do so. Kayla's fingers felt numb as she broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in that same careful script. She took a breath and began to read, her voice barely above a whisper at first. My dear Kayla. Her voice caught. She cleared her throat and continued, stronger. If you are reading this, then my time has come to an end. I hope it was peaceful. I hope I didn't cause too much trouble at the end. A small, sad laugh escaped Kayla's throat. That sounded exactly like him. For 2 years, you were the only person who treated me like a human being, not a bank account. You didn't know that I owned the restaurant chain where you worked. You didn't know that I had money or influence. To you, I was just Robert, a lonely old man who took up space at table 7 every morning. Victoria made a sound of disgust. Kayla ignored her and kept reading. You have no idea how rare that is, Kayla. How precious. In my world, every interaction is a transaction. Every relationship has an ulterior motive. But not with you. When you made sure my coffee was hot on cold mornings, it wasn't because you wanted something from me. When you took the time to cut my toast because you noticed my hands shaking, you weren't calculating what you might gain. You were simply being kind. Kayla's eyes blurred with tears, but she pushed forward. I watched you, Kayla. More than you knew. You saw how you treated the homeless man who wandered in last winter. How you paid for his breakfast out of your own pocket when you thought no one was looking. I saw you defend Rosa in the kitchen when that businessman was harassing her. Even though you knew it might cost you a tip, I saw you staying late to help Wim with inventory when his back was hurting. Never asking for overtime pay. Bradley scoffed loudly. Oh, this is ridiculous. A touching story, but be quiet. Victoria snapped at her son, her eyes fixed on the letter. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Kayla continued, her voice growing steadier. My family will inherit my personal wealth, but my businesses, the restaurants that have been my life's work, will go to someone who understands that feeding people is about dignity, not just profit. Someone who sees service as an honor, not a burden. Someone who treats every person who walks through the door like they matter. That person is you, Kayla. I won't lie to you. This is going to be hard. You're going to face people who doubt you, who underestimate you, who believe you don't deserve this opportunity. My own family will be among them. But I've left you more than just businesses and money. I've left you tools, information, evidence, and most importantly, I've surrounded you with good people who've been waiting for someone worthy to lead them. Trust Linda Chun, my CFO. Trust Marcus Williams. Trust the people who've been overlooked and underestimated, just like you. They'll help you succeed where my family has failed. Use these resources wisely, Kayla. Show the world that kindness and success can go hand in hand. Show my family that wealth isn't about who you were born to. It's about who you choose to be. And please, when you think of me, remember the man at table 7. Not the millionaire, not the businessman, just Robert, who was grateful every single day for your smile. With deepest gratitude and respect, Robert Whitmore. Kayla finished reading and sat in silence, tears streaming down her face. She didn't bother to wipe them away. The conference room was absolutely still. Then Victoria stood up, and when she spoke, her voice was ice. We're going to contest this, every word of it. Good luck with that, Dr. Hamilton said quietly. Mr. Whitmore spent 3 months documenting everything, every interaction, every act of kindness he witnessed. He hired private investigators to verify Miss Santos's character and intentions. He has security footage from the restaurant, witness statements, financial records proving she never sought anything from him. The will is bulletproof, Mrs. Whitmore. Bradley slammed his fist on the table. She's a con artist. She manipulated a sick, dying old man. Mr. Whitmore, Dr. Hamilton interrupted coldly, was surveilled by his own security team for 2 months before he changed his will. At his request, every conversation with Miss Santos was monitored. Every interaction was documented. Not once, not one single time did she ask him about his finances, his family, or anything else that could be construed as manipulation. She simply treated him with basic human decency. If you consider that manipulation, Mr. Whitmore, that says far more about you than it does about her. Victoria's eyes narrowed dangerously. She looked at Kayla with such pure hatred that it was almost physical. You may have fooled my father, but you won't last a week in this business. I will personally make sure of it. For the first time since entering the room, Kayla spoke directly to her. Mrs. Whitmore, I didn't ask for this. I didn't even know your father had money. I'm just a waitress who was kind to a customer, that's all. Exactly, Victoria said, her voice dripping with contempt. You're a waitress. A black waitress from God knows where, with no education, no experience, no qualifications whatsoever. You don't belong in our world. And mark my words, we will prove that my father was not in his right mind. We will take back what's ours. I think we're done here, Dr. Hamilton said firmly. Miss Santos, I'll have my assistant schedule a meeting with you tomorrow to begin the transition process. Mrs. Whitmore, Mr. Whitmore, you're welcome to pursue legal action, but I should warn you your father anticipated this reaction. Any attempt to contest the will or interfere with Miss Santos's inheritance will result in the immediate revocation of your inheritance as well. He made that very clear. Victoria's face went pale. He wouldn't. He absolutely would. Dr. Hamilton said, and he documented his reasons in great detail. I'd suggest you read the codicil before you make any rash decisions. As the Whitmore family gathered their things, moving with the stiff dignity of people who've just suffered a public humiliation, Bradley stopped near Kayla's chair. He leaned down, his voice low and venomous. You might have these restaurants, but you'll never have respect. People like you don't become people, like us, ever. Enjoy it while it lasts, because we're going to make your life a living hell. Then they were gone, leaving only the echo of expensive shoes on marble and the lingering scent of costly perfume. Kayla sat alone in the vast conference room, still clutching Robert's letter. Dr. Hamilton remained, watching her with an expression that might have been sympathy or might have been assessment. Miss Santos, he said finally, do you understand what just happened? Kayla looked up at him, her face still wet with tears but her eyes clear. I think I just inherited a war. Dr. Hamilton smiled grimly. Yes, that's exactly what you inherited. The question is, what are you going to do about it? The next 2 weeks felt like drowning in information, like being thrown into the deep end of a pool when you've only ever waded in the shallow part. Every day brought new challenges, new terminology, new faces studying her with expressions that ranged from skeptical to hostile to cautiously hopeful. Kayla moved through this new world like a stranger in a foreign country where she didn't speak the language. The Whitmore Holdings headquarters occupied an entire building in Boston's financial district, 12 stories of glass and steel. Lobbies with art installations that probably cost more than her childhood home. Conference rooms with technology she didn't know how to operate. Her office, Robert's old office, was on the top floor, overlooking the city, with a view that made her dizzy with vertigo and displacement. She stood at that window now, early morning light turning the Charles River gold, and tried to reconcile the woman reflected in the glass with the version of herself who'd been wiping down tables at Cafe Aurora 2 weeks ago. Same face, same dark eyes, same hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. But everything else had changed in ways she was still trying to understand. Her phone buzzed. Another message from Bradley. The 5th one this week. Each one more threatening than the last. She deleted it without reading, and turned back to the mountain of financial reports covering Robert's massive desk. Her desk. She corrected herself. Still couldn't quite believe it. The numbers swam before her eyes. Profit margins, operational costs, supplier contracts, labor expenses, depreciation schedules. She'd been staring at spreadsheets for so long that she was starting to dream in columns and rows, but something was emerging from all those numbers. Patterns, inconsistencies, things that didn't quite add up. A soft knock interrupted her concentration. Come in, she called, grateful for the distraction. The door opened to reveal a woman in her mid-40s, Asian American, wearing a sharp business suit and carrying yet another folder stuffed with papers. Her expression was professionally neutral, but Kayla had learned to read the subtle signs of judgment in this new world. This woman wasn't judging her, just evaluating. Miss Santos, I'm Linda Chun, Chief Financial Officer. She extended her hand. I apologize for not introducing myself sooner. I've been managing the quarterly reports. Kayla shook her hand, noting the firm grip. Please, call me Kayla. And thank you for these reports. I've been studying them. Something shifted in Linda's expression. Surprise, maybe. You've been reading the financial reports? All of them. Some of them multiple times. Kayla gestured at the papers scattered across the desk. Can I ask you something? About the Southern District numbers? Linda stepped further into the office, intrigued now. Of course. These supplier costs. Kayla pulled up a specific spreadsheet. They increased by 43% in the last 6 months, but the menu prices only went up 8%, and the quality ratings from customers actually went down. That doesn't make sense unless... She hesitated, not wanting to sound accusatory, unless someone changed suppliers to more expensive, lower quality vendors. Linda finished, her voice carefully neutral. Yes. But why would anyone do that? Linda stood silent for a long moment, studying Kayla's face as if trying to decide something important. Finally, she closed the office door and returned to the desk. May I speak candidly, please? Mr. Whitmore hired me 12 years ago when no other major firm would give an Asian woman a serious finance position. He saw my work, not my demographic. He trusted me with his company's money, which in this world is the highest form of trust. Linda pulled up a chair without being asked, a small gesture of equality that Kayla appreciated. In those 12 years, I've watched his family slowly undermine everything he built. Bradley, especially. He has expensive tastes and limited business sense. He's been positioning himself to take over for years, making changes that boost short-term appearances while damaging long-term stability. So those supplier changes were Bradley's idea. Yes, implemented about 8 months ago, right after Robert's 80th birthday. He claimed the old suppliers were outdated, that his connections could get better deals. Linda's expression hardened. The new suppliers are companies owned by Bradley's friends. They're paying kickbacks. The restaurants get inferior products at inflated prices. Bradley and his associates pocket the difference. Kayla felt anger building in her chest. That's theft. It's creative accounting, Linda said dryly. Perfectly legal if you structure it correctly, which Bradley's lawyers did. Morally bankrupt, but legal. And the staff changes in the Southern District. The experienced employees who were let go. Linda looked impressed. You noticed that too? Yes. Part of the same pattern. Bradley replaced longtime staff with younger, cheaper, less experienced workers, saved money on paper, destroyed service quality in practice. Those were people who'd been with the company for decades. People Robert personally hired and promoted. People of color, Kayla said quietly. Linda nodded. Predominantly. Yes. Bradley's vision for the company was, let's say he wanted a certain image. And that image was young, white, and what he called upscale. Kayla stood and walked back to the window, processing this information. The city sprawled below her. Thousands of people moving through their mornings, unaware that 12 stories up, a former waitress was trying to figure out how to run a multi-million-dollar company while its previous owner's family actively tried to destroy it. Linda, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Why are you telling me all this? You don't know me. For all you know, I could run straight to Bradley with everything you've said. Linda smiled, genuinely smiled for the first time. Robert told me about you. 3 months ago, when he changed the will. He asked me to watch for someone at Cafe Aurora, someone who treated him like he mattered. He said if anything happened to him, I should help you however I could. Kayla turned from the window, surprised. He talked about me constantly in those last months. How you made sure his coffee was always fresh. How you never rushed him, even during the morning rush. How you defended that line, Cook Rosa, I think from a customer who was being abusive. He said you had integrity, and in Robert Whitmore's book, that was worth more than any MBA. I don't have an MBA, Kayla admitted quietly. I don't have any business degree. I barely finished community college before I had to start working full-time to help my mom with bills. I know. Robert knew too. He didn't care. Linda pulled another folder from her briefcase. What you do have is something much rarer, common sense and common decency. And right now, this company needs both of those things far more than it needs another Harvard graduate who thinks profit is the only metric that matters. She opened the folder, revealing what looked like years of financial records. This is everything Bradley and Victoria have been hiding. Shell companies, offshore accounts, embezzled funds, falsified reports. Robert knew about all of it. He spent his last months documenting every detail. Kayla stared at the documents, her heart racing. This is evidence of fraud, extensive fraud, millions of dollars over several years. Robert could have turned them in, prosecuted them, destroyed them completely. But he was their father and grandfather. He couldn't bring himself to do it. So instead, he left the evidence to you, along with a choice. What choice? Linda's expression was serious. You can use this to protect yourself and the company, or you can use it for revenge. Robert hoped you'd choose the former, but he understood if you chose the latter. Kayla sat back down, her mind reeling. 2 weeks ago, her biggest concern was whether she'd have enough tip money to fix her car's broken taillight. Now she held in her hands the power to destroy a wealthy family's reputation and freedom. There's something else you need to know, Linda continued. Bradley is planning something. He's been holding secret meetings with regional managers, trying to turn them against you. He's spreading rumors that you manipulated Robert, that you're incompetent, that the company will collapse under your leadership. Will it? Kayla asked bluntly. Collapse, I mean. Am I really capable of running this? Linda studied her for a long moment. Honestly, I don't know. But I know you're capable of learning. I know you care about people, not just profits, and I know that in 2 weeks, you've already identified problems that Bradley and Victoria ignored for years. So yes, Kayla, I think you have a real shot at this. If you're willing to fight for it. A soft knock interrupted them. The door opened without waiting for permission, a deliberate power move, and Bradley Whitmore strolled in like he owned the place. Which, until recently, he'd assumed he would. Well, he said, his voice dripping with false cheer. The waitress is actually here. I half expected you to have run away by now. Kayla stood slowly, forcing herself to meet his eyes. Good morning, Bradley. What can I do for you? Good morning, Bradley. He mimicked in a high, mocking tone. So polite, so humble. Still playing the servant role. I see. He glanced at Linda dismissively. Linda, you can go. I need to speak with our new owner privately. Linda didn't move. Actually, I work for Miss Santos now, so unless she tells me to leave, I'm staying. Bradley's jaw tightened. I'm still family. Still a major stakeholder in. You're a trust fund recipient, Linda interrupted coolly. You have zero ownership, stake in Whitmore Holdings. Miss Santos is the sole proprietor. Those are the facts. Bradley's face flushed red. He turned his attention back to Kayla, his expression hardening. Fine. Then let me address the proprietor directly. I'm calling a meeting of all regional managers. Next Tuesday. I assume even you can manage to attend a simple meeting. What's the meeting about? Kayla asked, keeping her voice level. Operational review. Discussion of the company's direction under new leadership. The pause before that last word was deliberate and insulting. Some of us are concerned about the future. I'll be there, Kayla said simply. Bradley smiled, and there was nothing friendly in it. Excellent. I do hope you're prepared. These are serious business professionals, Kayla. They're going to have questions, hard questions, about your qualifications, your vision, your understanding of how this industry actually works. He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping. They're going to eat you alive. After he left, Linda turned to Kayla. That meeting is a setup. He's going to try to humiliate you in front of every important manager in the company. I know. And you're still going. Kayla smiled, and for the first time since this whole thing began, she felt something like certainty settling into her bones. I'm still going. Because Bradley made a mistake. What mistake? He assumed I can't learn. He assumed I can't prepare. He assumed that because I was a waitress, I'm stupid. Kayla pulled the folders closer. I have 6 days before that meeting. 6 days to learn everything I can about this company, its problems, and its solutions. And Linda, I'm going to need your help. Linda's smile was fierce. You've got it. Before we continue, I want to ask you something. If you were Kayla in this moment facing a room full of people who expect you to fail, what would you do? How would you prove them wrong? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And I'm genuinely curious about your perspective. The conference room on the 6th floor was designed to impress and intimidate in equal measure, a gleaming table that could seat 20 people stretched beneath, recessed lighting that made everything look sharp and slightly harsh. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Boston Harbor. Leather chairs that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent surrounded the table. When Kayla entered at 9:58 a.m. on Tuesday morning, every seat was already filled. 15 men, all middle-aged, all white, all wearing expensive suits and expressions of barely concealed contempt. They stopped their conversations mid-sentence to watch her walk in. Bradley sat at the far end of the table, in the seat that should have been Robert's, that should have been hers. He'd positioned himself as the de facto leader of this meeting, and his smile when he saw her was pure predator satisfaction. Everyone, "Let me introduce our new owner," he announced, his voice carrying that edge of mockery she'd come to recognize. "Miss Kayla Santos, who comes to us from— Where was it you were working again, Kayla?" "Oh, yes, serving coffee at one of our less prestigious locations." The laughter was low but unmistakable. Kayla felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her expression neutral. She'd known this was coming. Had prepared for it. Linda Chun entered behind her, carrying a laptop and a thick folder. She took the seat, directly to Kayla's right, a deliberate positioning that said, "We're together in this." Kayla sat at what should have been her rightful place at the head of the table. But Bradley had already claimed that space, so she sat in the first open chair, directly across from a man whose nameplate read, "Peterson, Southern District." "Well," Bradley continued, leaning back in his chair with casual arrogance, "now that everyone's here, let's discuss the current state of Whitmore Holdings. As many of you know, my grandfather made some unusual decisions in his final months. Decisions that have put the company in a rather precarious position." He pulled out a folder, making a show of examining documents. "Our new owner has been in charge for exactly," he checked his watch, "16 days, so I thought it might be helpful to ask her directly about her vision for the company. Kayla, perhaps you'd like to share your plans? I'm sure everyone here is eager to hear your revolutionary ideas." The sarcasm was thick enough to cut. Several managers exchanged knowing glances. Kayla took a breath, her heart hammering. This was it. The moment Bradley had engineered to destroy her credibility in front of every important person in the company. "Actually," she said, keeping her voice steady, "I do have some observations I'd like to share." Bradley's smile widened like a cat that's just cornered a mouse. "Please, enlighten us." Kayla opened her own folder, the one she and Linda had spent 6 days preparing. "I've spent the last 2 weeks visiting restaurants across the chain. 7 locations in total, spread across 3 states, and I noticed several concerning patterns." "Patterns," Peterson repeated, his tone suggesting he found the very idea amusing. "What sort of patterns? Could a waitress possibly, in 5 of the 7 locations I visited?" Kayla interrupted, her voice growing stronger. "I noticed that employees of color are disproportionately assigned to kitchen and cleaning positions, while customer-facing service roles are predominantly filled by white staff. In 3 locations, I personally witnessed managers treating employees of color with noticeably less respect and patience than their white counterparts." The smiles around the table started to fade. "Furthermore," Kayla continued, pulling out specific documents, "the menus are identical across all locations, despite serving neighborhoods with completely different demographics and economic profiles. The restaurant in downtown Boston charges $18 for a hamburger that costs $12 in the suburban locations, even though the actual food cost and preparation are virtually identical." Bradley tried to interrupt, but Kayla kept going, her confidence building with each word. "And there's something interesting about the customer reviews." She pulled out printed pages covered in highlighted text. "Complaints about service quality don't correlate with overall restaurant traffic or profitability. They correlate almost perfectly with 2 factors: locations with predominantly non-white staff, and locations where experienced employees were recently replaced with younger, cheaper workers." She looked directly at Peterson. "Your district shows the most dramatic example, Mr. Peterson. Service complaints up 37%, employee turnover up 62%, customer satisfaction scores down by half. All of this following what was called a staff optimization initiative 6 months ago." Peterson's face had gone from smugly amused to distinctly uncomfortable. "Those numbers are— That's not— I have the data right here," Linda interjected smoothly, connecting her laptop to the conference room display. Spreadsheets filled the screen, color-coded and annotated. "Miss Santos has been thorough in her analysis." "This is absurd," Bradley said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. "You can't just throw around accusations based on the company's own internal reports," Kayla said, "which I've been reading carefully." She pulled out another document. "Mr. Peterson, your district's profitability dropped 23% year over year. That's the steepest decline in the entire company. Can you explain why that is?" Peterson opened his mouth, then closed it. He hadn't expected her to have actual numbers. None of them had. "I can explain it," Kayla said. "The experienced staff. You fired people who'd been with this company for 10, 15, even 20 years. They knew how to run efficient operations. They knew the regular customers. They understood food costs and inventory management. They provided training and mentorship to new employees. When you replaced them with minimum wage workers who'd never managed a restaurant before, you saved maybe $50,000 in annual salaries, but you lost over $2 million in productivity, customer loyalty, and operational efficiency." She let that number hang in the air. "So when you talk about staff optimization, Mr. Peterson, what you actually mean is short-term cost-cutting that resulted in long-term profit collapse. And if I'm reading these demographic reports correctly, which Linda assures me I am, the employees you fired were predominantly older workers and people of color. The people you hired were predominantly young and white." Peterson's face had gone red. "Now you listen here." "No, you listen." Kayla's voice rose for the first time, and every person in the room went still. "I may have been a waitress, Mr. Peterson, but I've worked in restaurants my entire adult life. I know what makes them successful. It's not cheaper labor. It's not maximizing profit margins on every menu item. It's treating employees with respect, so they treat customers with respect. It's understanding your community. It's consistency and quality." She stood, and the action commanded attention in a way she hadn't expected. Robert Whitmore built this company on those principles. He hired people others overlooked. He promoted based on competence, not connections. He created a workplace culture where people took pride in their work. And in the last 2 years, since he stepped back from daily operations, that culture has been systematically dismantled. Bradley stood as well, his face flushed with anger now. "This is ridiculous. You've been here 2 weeks and you think you can judge decisions made by experienced professionals. Experienced professionals who've driven this company's profit margin down 18%. Kayla interrupted, pulling out yet another report. "That's not my analysis. That's from your own third-quarter financial report, submitted to the board 3 months ago." Robert saw these numbers. "That's part of why he made the decisions he did." She turned to address the room. "Gentlemen, I know what you think of me. I know what Bradley has been telling you, that I'm unqualified, that I manipulated a sick old man, that I have no business running this company. Maybe some of that is true. Maybe I don't have the credentials you think matter. But I have something else. I have common sense. And I have access to every financial report, every internal memo, every piece of documentation from the last 5 years." Her eyes landed on Bradley. "Including the ones you thought were private." Bradley went very still. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the supplier contracts you changed 8 months ago. The ones that tripled costs while reducing quality. The ones where the new suppliers happen to be companies owned by your college friends, companies that pay you consulting fees." She pulled out a document and slid it across the table. "I'm talking about financial arrangements that look an awful lot like kickbacks, Bradley. The kind that could interest regulatory agencies." The room had gone deadly silent. "I'm talking about offshore accounts, shell companies, and millions of different dollars in funds that somehow disappeared from company accounts while you were managing operations." Kayla's voice was calm now, almost gentle. "Robert knew about all of it. He documented everything. And he left all of that documentation to me." Bradley's face had gone from red to white. "You're bluffing, am I?" Kayla pulled out a thick folder and dropped it on the table. The sound was like a gavel falling. "These are copies. The originals are with legal counsel, along with instructions to forward everything to appropriate authorities if any attempt is made to interfere with my management of this company." She looked around the table at the managers who'd come here expecting to watch her humiliation. "Robert Whitmore gave me this company because he believed I would protect what he built. Not just the profits, though those matter, but the principles. Treating people fairly. Serving communities, not just extracting money from them. Building something worth being proud of." Her voice strengthened. "So here's what's going to happen. I'm implementing immediate changes. First, every employee termination from the last 18 months will be reviewed. Anyone who was let go without proper cause will be offered their position back with full back pay for lost wages. Second, all supplier contracts implemented in the last year will be audited by an independent firm. Any contract that's inflating costs without improving quality gets canceled. Third, every manager in this company will undergo mandatory training on workplace discrimination and fair employment practices. You can't just... Peterson started. I can, actually, Kayla said. I own this company. Every restaurant, every contract, every decision. That's what ownership means, and if any kunder of you have a problem with these changes, you're welcome to tender your resignation. I'll accept it immediately. She gathered her folders. This meeting is adjourned. Linda will send you each a detailed memo outlining the new policies by end of business today. Questions can be directed to her office. Thank you for your time. She walked out of the conference room with her head high, Linda following close behind. Behind her, she could hear the eruption of voices, shock, anger, confusion. But she didn't stop, didn't look back. It wasn't until they reached the elevator and the doors closed, cutting off the chaos behind them, that Kayla's knees started to shake. Oh my God, she whispered, leaning against the elevator wall. Did that really just happen? Linda was grinning wider than Kayla had ever seen. That really just happened. You just took Bradley Whitmore apart in front of every manager in the company. Kayla, that was spectacular. I thought I was going to throw up. You looked completely in control, powerful, like you'd been running companies your whole life. Linda shook her head in amazement. Do you know what you just did? You didn't just defend yourself. You went on the offensive. You showed them you're not some scared waitress playing dress-up. You're a woman who did her homework and came prepared to fight. The elevator dinged, opening onto the executive floor. Kayla's floor now. As they walked toward her office, Linda's phone started, buzzing frantically. She glanced at it and laughed. The managers are already calling, some demanding more information, some asking about the audit. And she paused, reading a message. Mr. Peterson just resigned. He resigned? Effective immediately. Probably figures he'd rather quit than face an audit that will expose what he's been doing. Linda's expression turned serious. Kayla, this is just the beginning. Bradley's not going to let this go, and some of those managers are going to fight you every step of the way. I know. Kayla entered her office and moved to the window, looking out over the city that still felt surreal to claim as part of her domain. But Linda, I learned something important in there. What's that? They expected me to be intimidated because I don't have their credentials or their background. They expected me to accept their judgment of my bravant worth. But you know what? I've spent my whole life being underestimated. By teachers who assumed I wouldn't amount to anything. By customers who treated me like I was less than human. By a world that looked at my skin color and my zip code and decided what I was capable of before I even opened my mouth. She turned from the window. Bradley and his managers, they're just more of the same, and I'm done accepting other people's limitations of me. If Robert Whitmore thought I could do this, then I owe it to him and to myself to at least try. Linda smiled. Robert chose well. He really did. Kayla's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. She opened it. You just made a very big mistake. Enjoy your victory. It will be your last. VW. Victoria Whitmore. The matriarch herself, weighing in now. Kayla showed the message to Linda, who frowned. That's concerning. It's a promise, Kayla said quietly. A promise that they're going to escalate. What are you going to do? Kayla thought about Robert at table 7. About his trembling hands and quiet dignity. About the letter he'd left her, trusting her with his life's work. About the people he'd hired Linda, Marcus, Sophia, James, all the talented individuals who'd been marginalized and overlooked. I'm going to keep doing my homework, she said. I'm going to learn everything about this company, the good and the bad. I'm going to find every loyal employee who shares Robert's values and build a team that actually cares about something beyond quarterly profits. And I'm going to document everything the Whitmores do to try to stop me. She pulled out the folder Linda had shown her weeks ago, the one with evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. Because if they push me far enough, I won't just defend myself. I'll bury them. Linda looked at her with something like awe. 2 weeks ago, you were wiping down tables at a diner. 2 weeks ago, Kayla corrected softly. I was surviving in a world that tried to keep me small. Now Robert gave me the resources to do more than survive. He gave me the chance to prove that people like me, people from neighborhoods like mine, people who've been counted out their whole lives, we're not just capable of succeeding, we're capable of excellence. She smiled, and there was steel in it. The Whitmores are about to learn a very expensive lesson. Never underestimate someone who has nothing left to lose and everything to prove. That night, alone in Robert's office, her office, Kayla stood before the painting that hid the safe. The office was dark except for the city lights streaming through the windows, casting long shadows across the expensive furniture and polished floors. Dr. Hamilton had given her the combination in a sealed envelope weeks ago, but she'd been too overwhelmed, too busy, too scared to open it. Now, after the confrontation with Bradley and the managers, after Victoria's threatening message, she knew it was time. Her hands trembled slightly as she removed the painting an original hopper. Linda had mentioned casually, worth probably $500,000, and revealed the safe behind it. She spun the combination dial carefully. 730-4702. 7:30 was when Robert arrived at the cafe each morning. 47 was the number of restaurants in the chain. She didn't know what the 0 to 2 meant. The safe clicked open. Inside was more than she'd expected. Not just documents, but years of meticulous record-keeping. USB drives labeled by year and category. Folders organized with the precision of someone who knew exactly what evidence would be needed. Handwritten notes in Robert's shaky script, explaining contexts and connections. Kayla pulled everything out carefully, spreading it across the desk. Then she began to read. The first folder was labeled Bradley, Financial Misconduct, 2021 to 2024. Inside were bank statements, wire transfer records, emails, and annotated spreadsheets. Robert had tracked every questionable transaction, every suspicious payment, every instance where money left Whitmore Holdings and ended up in accounts connected to Bradley. It was devastating, methodical, irrefutable. $2.3 million embezzled over 3 years through fake consulting fees, overpriced supplier contracts, and shell companies, all documented with bank records, tax filings, and email chains where Bradley and his associates discussed how to hide the money. The second folder was worse. Victoria, trust fund misuse, and elder exploitation. Robert had documented how his daughter had been systematically draining his personal accounts for years, forging his signature on checks, taking out loans using his property as collateral without his knowledge. There were recordings Robert had apparently worn a wire during several conversations where Victoria discussed her father's declining health as an opportunity to finally get access to what's rightfully ours. End quote. Kayla felt sick listening to Victoria talk about her own father like he was an obstacle to be removed. The third folder contained something different: discrimination and hostile work environment, evidence for legal action. Inside were years of complaints from employees, formal complaints that had been filed with HR and then mysteriously disappeared or were dismissed without investigation. Complaints about racial slurs, unequal pay, wrongful termination, sexual harassment. Robert had obtained copies of every single one. He'd interviewed the employees privately, recorded their stories, gathered evidence that HR had deliberately buried. There were security camera footage files showing managers using racial epithets when they thought no one was watching. Email chains discussing how to avoid hiring certain types of people. It was systemic, institutional. And Robert had documented every instance over the course of years. But the most damning folder was labeled simply, Plan to remove Robert and seize company. Inside were email printouts dated from 18 months ago, right after Robert's 81st birthday. Bradley and Victoria had been communicating with lawyers about having Robert declared mentally incompetent. They'd discussed evidence. They could fabricate memory lapses, confusion, poor decision-making. They'd even consulted with doctors about how to make a case for early-stage dementia. If we can get him declared incompetent before he changes anything major, we can contest any modifications to the will. Dr. Morris says confusion and paranoia are early signs we could document. Kayla sat back, stunned. They'd been planning to steal his agency, his autonomy, his very dignity in his final years. And the only thing that had stopped them was Robert's cancer diagnosis, which had accelerated his timeline for changing the will. The final item in the safe was a video file on a USB drive, labeled, "For Kayla, play this alone." With shaking hands, she plugged it into her computer. Robert's face appeared on screen, looking frailer than she remembered him, but with eyes that were clear and sharp. The video was dated 3 months ago, just days before he changed his will. "Hello, Kayla." His familiar voice came through the speakers. "If you're watching this, then I'm gone, and you're trying to figure out what to do with the mess I've left you, despite everything." Kayla smiled. That was pure Robert, self-deprecating even beyond the grave. "I want to tell you why I chose you. Not just because you were kind, though you were. Not just because you were honest, though you were that too. I chose you because I saw in you something I'd lost somewhere. Along the way, the belief that how we treat people matters more than how much money we make." He coughed, pausing to collect himself. "I built Whitmore Holdings from nothing. Started with one small diner in 1972, back when nobody would loan money to a working-class kid with no collateral. I worked 18-hour days. I treated my employees like family. I believed that if you fed people good food with good service, success would follow. And it did." Robert's expression darkened. "But somewhere along the line, my own family forgot those principles. Victoria grew up with money. Never had to struggle. Never had to see people as anything other than means to an end. And I failed to teach her better. That's on me." He leaned forward, his gaze intense even through the screen. "Bradley is worse. He has the arrogance of privilege without any of the responsibility that should come with it. He sees the restaurants as cash machines, the employees as expendable, the customers as wallets to be emptied. He's been stealing from the company for years, thinking I was too old and tired to notice." Another cough, longer this time. When he recovered, his voice was quieter. "I noticed everything, Kayla. I spent the last 2 years of my life gathering evidence, documenting every crime, every betrayal. I could have turned them in, could have sent my own daughter and grandson to prison, but I'm a coward, I suppose. I couldn't do it. I'm their father, their grandfather. Despite everything, I love them." He paused. "But I won't let them destroy what I built. That's where you come in." Robert's expression softened. "In you, I saw the person I used to be. Someone who understands that service isn't servitude. Someone who treats every person with dignity regardless of their station. Someone who cuts an old man's toast without making him feel helpless. Someone who pays for a homeless person's meal when they think no one is watching." "Oh yes," he smiled. "I saw that. I saw a lot of things. I saw you defend Rosa when that businessman was harassing her. Even though I knew it might cost you a tip. I saw you stay late to help Wim when his back hurt, never asking for extra pay. I saw you treat every customer, rich or poor, kind or rude, with the same patient professionalism." He leaned back. "I'm giving you the companies, Kayla, but I'm also giving you a choice. You can run them honestly, the way I tried to in the beginning. Or you can use the evidence I've left you to destroy Victoria and Bradley completely. Either choice is valid. Either choice is yours to make." His voice grew stronger. "If you choose honesty, the road will be hard. They'll fight you. They'll try to undermine you. They'll use every privilege, every connection, every advantage they have to prove you're unworthy. But you'll have allies. Linda Chun is brilliant and loyal. Marcus Williams is one of the best operators in the business. Sophia Morales is a genius with food. James Park understands modern marketing better than anyone I've met. Trust them. Build a team with them. They've all been waiting for someone who actually deserves their loyalty." He coughed again, and this time it went on for nearly a minute. When he recovered, he looked exhausted. "If you choose revenge, I won't judge you. God knows they've earned it. The evidence is ironclad. One phone call to the FBI, And Victoria and Bradley will spend years in legal hell. Their lives will be destroyed. Everything they've taken for granted will be stripped away. Robert smiled sadly. I'm a coward, because I couldn't make that call myself. But I also know that sometimes justice requires a harder heart than mine. If you choose that path, do it decisively. Don't hesitate. Don't warn them. Just act. He leaned toward the camera, his eyes meeting hers through time and space. Whichever you choose, Kayla. Remember this. You didn't ask for this. You didn't manipulate anyone. You were just kind to an old man who needed kindness. The fact that it changed your life is justice, not theft. Never let anyone make you feel guilty for accepting what was freely given. His expression gentled. I spent 52 years building this company. I want it to survive me, to mean something beyond money. I think you can make that happen. I think you're strong enough, smart enough, and good enough to build something even better than what I created. He smiled one last time, that soft, warm smile she remembered from table 7. Thank you, Kayla. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. Thank you for treating me like I mattered. In those last 2 years, sitting at table 7, drinking coffee you made sure was always fresh, I felt more human than I had in decades. That's worth more than all the money in my accounts. The video ended. Kayla sat in darkness, tears streaming down her face. The weight of Robert's trust, his vulnerability, his hope, it was overwhelming. She looked at the evidence spread across the desk. Phone calls away from destroying the Whitmores. Completely. Justice, if she wanted it. Revenge, if she chose it. Or the harder path, using the evidence only as protection, while she tried to build something worthy of Robert's legacy. Her phone buzzed. Another message from Victoria. We're filing a legal challenge to the will tomorrow. We have doctors ready to testify that Robert was mentally compromised. You're going to lose everything, and then we're going to make sure you're prosecuted for elder abuse. You should have stayed in your place. Kayla read the message 3 times. Then she made her decision. She picked up her phone and called Linda, not caring that it was past midnight. Linda, I need you to arrange a meeting. All the managers, all the department heads, everyone senior in the company. Day after tomorrow. Kayla, it's midnight. I know, but Victoria just declared war, officially. And I'm done being defensive. It's time to show them exactly who they're dealing with. What are you planning? Kayla looked at the evidence, at Robert's video paused on her screen, at the city lights stretching into darkness beyond her windows. I'm planning to win, she said simply. Not by destroying them, not yet, but by showing everyone in this company exactly what the Whitmores have been hiding. By building a team strong enough that they can't tear us down. By proving that Robert's faith in me wasn't misplaced. She paused. And if they keep pushing, if they keep threatening, if they actually try to prosecute me for elder abuse. Her voice hardened. Then I'll use every piece of evidence Robert left me. I'll burn their lives to the ground and salt the earth behind me. But that's their choice, not mine. I'm giving them one chance to back off. Linda was quiet for a moment. Then, damn, okay, I'll set up the meeting. Thank you. And Linda? Can you contact Marcus, Sophia, and James? Tell them I want to meet with them first thing tomorrow morning. I'm putting together a leadership team, and I want people Robert trusted. They'll be there. After they hung up, Kayla carefully returned all the evidence to the safe, except for one folder, the one documenting discrimination and employee complaints. That one she would need for the meeting. She locked the safe, replaced the painting, and stood looking at it for a long moment. Behind that innocent landscape was enough proof to destroy a family. The power felt heavy, dangerous, intoxicating. I won't use it unless I have to, she whispered to the empty room, to Robert's ghost, to herself. But if they force my hand, I won't hesitate. She thought about Victoria's message, about the threatened legal challenge, the doctors ready to lie, the accusation of elder abuse. They were playing a dangerous game. They just didn't know it yet, because when you underestimate someone who has nothing to lose and everything to prove, you give them the most dangerous weapon of all, motivation. The meeting room was packed. Every regional manager, every department head, every senior staff member of Whitmore Holdings was present. More than 30 people crowded into a space designed for 20. They stood along the walls when the chairs ran out, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile to cautiously hopeful. Kayla stood at the front of the room with Linda to her right and three people she'd only met yesterday morning to her left. Marcus Williams, a 45-year-old black man who'd managed the most profitable restaurant in the chain before being mysteriously transferred to the worst location. Sofia Morales, a 38-year-old Latina chef whose innovative menu proposals had been consistently rejected for being too ethnic. And James Park, a 29-year-old Korean-American marketing specialist whose campaigns targeting diverse communities had been called off-brand and shelved. All three had stories of being sidelined, dismissed, undermined by the previous management. All three had stayed because Robert had personally hired them and asked them to wait. Now they stood beside Kayla, a visible statement of the kind of leadership she intended to build. "Thank you all for coming," Kayla began, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "I know some of you are here because you're required to be. Some of you are curious. And some of you," she looked at a cluster of managers she knew were loyal to Bradley, "are here because you're waiting for me to fail." A ripple of uncomfortable shifting went through the room. "That's fine. I understand skepticism. 2 weeks ago, I was serving coffee. Now I own the company. That's a hard transition to accept or trust." She clicked to the first slide of her presentation, a photo of Robert at Cafe Aurora, sitting at table 7, taken without his knowledge months ago. Robert Whitmore started this company 52 years ago with one small diner and a belief that feeding people was about dignity, not just profit. He built something remarkable, a chain of restaurants known for quality, consistency, and fair treatment of staff. He did it by hiring people others overlooked, by promoting based on competence instead of connections, by believing that everyone deserved respect. She clicked to the next slide, financial data showing the company's trajectory over decades. The company thrived for years. Then, about 5 years ago, something changed. Profit margins started declining. Employee turnover increased. Customer satisfaction scores dropped. Reviews got worse. And nobody seemed to know why. Bradley, standing near the back of the room with his arms crossed, spoke up loudly. "Nobody except the person with no business experience who's been here 2 weeks." Kayla looked at him calmly. "Actually, Bradley, I think someone else knew. Your grandfather knew. That's why he spent his last 2 years documenting everything that was happening to his company." She clicked to the next slide, a graph showing employee demographics over time. 5 years ago, this company had a diverse workforce that roughly matched the communities we served. Today, kitchen and cleaning staff are 73% people of color, while customer-facing positions are 81% white. That's not random. That's policy. Murmurs went through the room. 3 years ago, Marcus Williams was managing the Newbury Street location, our flagship restaurant, our most profitable location. He'd increased revenue by 32% in 2 years. His staff had the lowest turnover rate in the company. Customer reviews were consistently 5 stars. She looked at Marcus. "Then Bradley transferred you to the Springfield location, our worst-performing restaurant with the highest costs and lowest revenue. Why do you think that was, Marcus?" Marcus spoke, quietly but clearly. "Bradley told me the Springfield location needed an experienced manager to turn it around. I thought it was a promotion. It was a burial," Kayla said bluntly. "No extra support, no additional resources, no realistic targets. Just an impossible situation where you were set up to fail. And if you had failed, it would have justified not promoting other people of color to senior positions." Bradley pushed off the wall, his face flushed. "This is ridiculous. Personnel decisions aren't about race. They're about fit and capability. Are they?" Kayla clicked to another slide, email excerpts, names redacted except for Bradley's. Quote, "We need to upgrade our front-of-house image. Target younger, more upscale demographics. Think Newbury Street shopping crowd, not Mattapan bus riders." The room went silent. "For those who don't know Boston geography," Kayla said coldly, "Newbury Street is 90% white and affluent. Mattapan is predominantly black and working class. So when Bradley talks about upgrading our image and targeting demographics, he's using corporate speak for racial profiling." She clicked again. Another email. Quote, "The old-timers are resistant to change. We need fresh blood who won't question new systems. Target recent hospitality school grads who don't have bad habits yet. She looked around the room. Old-timers meant employees who'd been with the company for 10+ years. Bad habits meant knowing enough about operations to recognize when new policies didn't make sense. Fresh blood meant younger, cheaper, less experienced workers who wouldn't push back. An entire generation of experienced employees, many of them people of color, was systematically replaced with inexperienced staff. And we wonder why service quality declined. Where are you getting these emails? Bradley demanded, his voice rising. Those were private communications. Nothing sent on company servers is private, Bradley. You know that. And Robert had access to everything. He was the owner. Kayla's voice was ice cold now. He spent his last years watching you dismantle what he built, and he documented every decision, every email, every instance of discrimination. She clicked to the next slide, financial data. But this meeting isn't about shaming anyone. It's about fixing what's broken. So let's talk about money. The room's attention sharpened. Money. They understood. 3 years ago, this company's profit margin was 22%. Today, it's 18%. That's a decline of nearly 20% in profitability despite revenue remaining stable. Where did that money go? Linda stepped forward, taking over the presentation. Some of it went to supplier cost increases, but not market rate increases. Our food costs went up 43% while market prices only increased 12%. The difference? New suppliers who charge premium prices for lower quality products. She pulled up a comparison chart. Old supplier, chicken breast, restaurant grade, $3.20 per pound. New supplier, chicken breast, same grade, $5.80 per pound. That's an 81% increase. Multiply that across every protein, every produce item, every ingredient. We're hemorrhaging money on inflated supply contracts. The new suppliers were more reliable. Bradley protested. Better quality control. The new suppliers, Kayla interrupted, are companies owned by your former fraternity brothers and college roommates. Companies that, coincidentally, pay you consulting fees. $20,000 a month, according to the bank records. The room erupted. Managers talking over each other, some defending Bradley, some expressing shock, some clearly unsurprised. Kayla raised her voice. This isn't about personal vendettas. This is about saving a Wes company that's been bleeding money due to corrupt practices. Every dollar spent on overpriced supplies is a dollar not invested in employee wages, restaurant improvements, or expansion. It's theft, not just from the company, but from every person in this room whose bonus potential declined because profits dropped. She let that sink in. Hit them in the wallet, Linda had advised. They'll pay attention then. So here's what's going to happen, Kayla continued. Effective immediately, all supplier contracts implemented in the last 3 years will be audited by an independent firm. Any Kayla contract that can't justify its pricing will be canceled and rebid competitively. All HR decisions from the past 5 years, every termination, every transfer, every promotion and non-promotion, will be reviewed by an external employment law firm. Any decision that appears discriminatory will be reversed where possible, and employees will be compensated. This is insane, someone called from the back. You're going to bankrupt the company with these audits and compensation payments. The company is already being bankrupted, Marcus interjected, his voice carrying authority. Just slowly, through corruption and mismanagement. What Ms. Santos is proposing will stop the bleeding. In the long run, it will save millions. Kayla nodded gratefully at him. Marcus, I'm reinstating you as manager of the Newbury Street location. Effective next week. Your salary will be adjusted to reflect the position's importance, and you'll have full authority over hiring and operations. She turned to Sophia. Sophia Morales has proposed menu modifications that reflect Boston's actual demographics, not what Bradley thinks they should be. We'll be piloting her menus at 3 locations next month. Sophia will have complete creative control and budget authority, and James Park, she continued, will be promoted to Director of Marketing and Community Engagement. He'll be developing campaigns that actually speak to the communities we serve, not just the communities Bradley wishes we served. Bradley's voice was shaking with rage now. You can't just. This is my family's company. It was your family's company, Kayla corrected. Now it's mine. That's what the will says. That's what the law says. And if you don't like it, you're welcome to contest it in court. She smiled, cold and confident. But I should warn you. Victoria already tried that yesterday. She filed a challenge claiming Robert was mentally incompetent when he changed the will. She clicked to a new slide, a legal document. This is a statement from Robert's oncologist, dated 2 months before the will was changed. It certifies that despite his terminal illness, Robert Whitmore showed no signs of cognitive decline, dementia, or impaired judgment. His mind was completely sound. Another slide. This is a statement from his primary care physician of 30 years. Same conclusion. Another slide. This is from a neuropsychologist who Robert voluntarily visited to be evaluated specifically, so his mental competence couldn't be questioned. Not only was he sound of mind, he scored in the 95th percentile for his age group on cognitive tests. The slides kept coming medical evaluations, psychiatric assessments, even video recordings of Robert clearly and coherently explaining his reasons for changing the will. Robert knew his family would challenge his decisions, Kayla said. So he made absolutely certain there was no legal basis to do so. Victoria's challenge was denied this morning. The will stands. She paused, letting that information settle over the room like snow. Now, I know some of you are loyal to Bradley and Victoria. I understand that. They're family, and family loyalty means something. But I want you to ask yourselves, are you loyal to them, or to what this company could be? To what it was supposed to be? She clicked to a final slide, a photograph of Robert from 40 years ago, standing in front of his first restaurant with his wife. Both of them smiling, proud, full of hope. This is what Robert built. A place where hard work mattered more than who your parents were. Where diversity was strength, not a problem to be managed. Where feeding people well was its own reward. That vision got lost somewhere. I'm here to find it again. She looked around the room, meeting as many eyes as she could. I don't expect all of you to support me. I don't expect to win everyone over. But I'm asking for a chance. Give me 6 months. If the company isn't more profitable, if employees aren't happier, if customers aren't more satisfied, then judge me as harshly as you want. But give me 6 months to prove that Robert's faith in me wasn't misplaced. The silence that followed was different from before. Less hostile, more thoughtful. Then someone started clapping. One person, then two, then a dozen. Not everyone, several managers, clearly Bradley's allies, stood stone-faced or actively glowering. But enough people applauded that it felt like permission. Like possibility. Bradley stormed out, shoulder-checking a manager who didn't move fast enough. His exit was dramatic, childish, and told Kayla everything she needed to know about his next moves. After the meeting dispersed, Marcus, Sophia, James, and Linda remained. That was incredible, Sophia said, her eyes bright. I've been waiting 5 years to see someone stand up to Bradley like that. It's not over, Kayla warned. He's going to retaliate. They both are. Let them try, Marcus said firmly. You've got Robert's evidence. You've got the law on your side. And now you've got a team. We've all been waiting for this moment, James nodded. I've already drafted a media strategy for when the Whitmores go public with attacks. We control the narrative from day one. Linda pulled out her laptop. And I've identified 3 managers who are definitely going to try to sabotage operations on Bradley's behalf. We need to monitor them closely. Kayla looked at these 4 people, strangers a month ago. Now her leadership team, her allies in a war she hadn't asked for but was determined to win. Thank Dawn. You, she said simply. All of you. I can't do this alone. You're not alone, Marcus replied. That's the whole point. I want to hear from you now. Kayla just took a massive risk exposing Bradley and Victoria in front of the entire company. Do you think she should have gone public with everything? Or do you think she should have handled it privately? What would you do in her position? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to know what you're thinking. As this story unfolds, 5 months later, Kayla stood in almost the same conference room where she'd been humiliated and where she'd fought back. But everything else had changed. The wall behind her displayed a massive presentation screen showing the quarterly financial report. Revenue up 22%. Profit margins up 7% from last year. Customer satisfaction scores up 33%. Employee retention up 48%. Every metric trending upward, like a rocket ship. And seated around the table weren't Bradley's cronies or hostile managers. It was a board of directors. She'd personally assembled industry experts, community leaders, and 3 employees who'd worked their way up from entry-level positions. The board Robert had wanted but never had the heart to force on his family. Today was the day everything would be finalized. Today, the Whitmores would either accept reality or face consequences they couldn't escape. Dr. Hamilton sat at the head of the table, older and more tired-looking than he'd been 6 months ago. Beside him were 2 FBI agents in dark suits. Across from them, looking smaller and grayer than Kayla remembered, sat Victoria and Bradley Whitmore. They'd aged in these months. The fight had cost them. "Let's begin," Dr. Hamilton said formally. "We're here to discuss the resolution of several outstanding legal matters involving the Whitmore family and Whitmore Holdings." He opened a folder. "First, the matter of the will challenge. Mrs. Whitmore, you've exhausted all legal avenues to contest your father's will. 3. Separate judges have ruled that the will was valid, properly executed, and that Robert Whitmore was of sound mind. Do you accept this ruling?" Victoria's voice was barely audible. "Yes." "Second, the matter of the assets distributed to you and your son under the will. The Beacon Hill residence, the summer homes, the art collection, and the trust fund. These remain yours, as specified in the will. However, there are conditions." He pulled out another document. Robert's will included a codicil that would revoke your inheritance entirely if you attempted to interfere with Miss Santos's management of the company or engaged in any actions intended to harm the business or its reputation. The evidence suggests you've violated those terms multiple times. Victoria's lawyer, a tired-looking man who'd clearly advised against this entire confrontation from the beginning, spoke up. "My clients dispute that characterization. Your clients," one of the FBI agents interrupted, "are facing federal charges for wire fraud, money laundering, and embezzlement. They're not in a position to dispute much of anything." Bradley finally spoke, his voice stripped of its former arrogance. "What do you want?" Kayla had been silent until now, letting the lawyers and agents do their work. But this question was for her to answer. She looked at Bradley and Victoria, these people who'd called her unqualified, who'd threatened her, who'd spent months trying to destroy everything Robert had entrusted to her. "I want you to disappear," she said simply. "From the company, from the board, from any position where you can influence operations or hurt the people who work here. We already don't have any role in the company," Victoria said bitterly. "You made sure of that. No, you still have influence. You still have connections, managers who are loyal to you, suppliers who give you information, board members from the old structure who think I'm a temporary aberration." Kayla's voice was calm. "Factual. I want you gone completely. No more whisper campaigns, no more attempts to poach employees, no more interviews with business press painting yourselves as victims of a hostile takeover." "And if we refuse?" Bradley asked. Kayla nodded to the FBI agents. They pulled out folders of their own. "Then we proceed with prosecution," the senior agent said. "We have evidence of financial crimes totaling over $3 million. Wire fraud carries up to 20 years. Money laundering, up to 20 years. Embezzlement, up to 15 years. Even with plea deals, you're both looking at significant prison time." Victoria went very pale. "You wouldn't." "I don't want to," Kayla said honestly. "Robert didn't want to. He spent his last months gathering evidence but couldn't bring himself to use it because you're his family. He loved you, even though you didn't deserve it." Her voice hardened. "But I'm not Robert. I don't have his sentimental attachment to people who treated him terribly. And I won't let you destroy what he built just because you think you're entitled to it by birth." She pulled out a document of her own. "Here's the offer. You sign away any claim to involvement in Whitmore Holdings. You agree to a permanent non-disparagement clause. You don't talk about the company, about me, about any of this publicly or privately. You take your inheritance from Robert's personal estate and disappear." "In exchange for what?" Victoria asked, in exchange for me not pressing charges. The evidence stays sealed. The FBI investigation stops here. You get to keep your freedom and your remaining money. How much money? Bradley asked. And there was something pathetic in his desperation. Dr. Hamilton consulted his documents. After settling the embezzlement claims and repaying what you stole, the trust fund stands at approximately $38 million. The properties and art collection are worth another $12 million. You'll split it equally. $19 million each plus half the personal assets. $19 million, Bradley repeated numbly. We were supposed to get $25 million each plus full control of the company. You were supposed to earn your father's respect, Kayla said coldly. You were supposed to value something beyond money. You were supposed to treat people with dignity. You failed at all of that. $19 million is more than you deserve. The room was silent except for the ticking of an antique clock on the wall. Robert's clock, brought from his Beacon Hill study. Finally, Victoria spoke. If we sign this, we never have to see you again? Never, Kayla confirmed. I'll buy out any remaining minor stakes you might have. You take your money, live your lives, and stay out of mine. Victoria looked at her son. Some wordless communication passed between them. Resignation, defeat, the understanding that they'd lost and there was no way back. Where do we sign? She asked. 20 minutes later, it was done. Signatures on multiple documents, witnessed by lawyers and agents. The Whitmores were officially removed from any connection to Whitmore Holdings. They would keep their inheritance but lose any claim to the company that bore their name. As they prepared to leave, Victoria stopped at the door. She looked back at Kayla with an expression that wasn't quite respect but wasn't contempt either. Something more complicated. You know, she said quietly. I still think you manipulated him. I'll always think that. But I'm beginning to understand why he chose you. Why's that? Kayla asked. 'Cause you actually give a damn. About the company. About the company. Employees. About doing things right instead of just profitable. We never cared about any of that. We just wanted the money. She smiled bitterly. Turns out there's a difference. Who knew? Then they were gone, walking out of the building and out of Kayla's life. Dr. Hamilton stood to leave as, well, congratulations, Miss Santos. You've officially survived your first 6 months as a business owner. And not just survived, thrived. Robert would be proud. After everyone left, Kayla stood alone in the conference room, looking out at the city that no longer felt quite so foreign. She pulled out her phone and opened the photo app, scrolling to a picture she'd found in Robert's desk months ago. It was Robert and his wife on their 50th anniversary, standing in front of the original Whitmore's diner. They looked so happy, so full of love and hope. She'd had the photo framed and hung it in every restaurant in the chain. A reminder of what they were building toward. Not just profits, but purpose. Her phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. Grand opening of the new Roxbury location tomorrow at 10 a.m. The community is excited. We're going to pack the place. The Roxbury location was her baby. A restaurant in a predominantly black neighborhood that previous management had refused to invest in. She'd poured resources into it, hired from the community, designed a menu that reflected the neighborhood's culture. It was everything Robert had preached and his family had ignored. Kayla smiled and typed back, I'll be there. She took one last look at the conference room where she'd been judged, threatened, and underestimated. Where she'd fought back and won. Then she turned off the lights and walked out. Tomorrow was a new restaurant, a new community, a new opportunity to prove that success and humanity weren't mutually exclusive. But tonight, she'd go home to her small apartment she hadn't upgraded to anything fancy despite being able to afford it now, and she'd think about Robert, about Table 7, about black coffee and whole wheat toast, about small kindnesses that changed everything. Because that's where it had all started. Not with business plans or financial strategies or corporate takeovers, but with a lonely old man and a waitress who'd treated him like he mattered. And in the end, that simple act of human decency had been worth more than all the millions the Whitmores had spent their lives chasing. The Forbes magazine cover featured Kayla in one of Whitmore Holdings' restaurants, wearing a simple blouse and slacks, standing beside Marcus, Sophia, and James. The headline read, From waitress to CEO. How Kayla Santos is redefining success in the restaurant industry. She stood in her office, still Robert's office, in her heart holding the magazine and trying to process that the woman on the cover was actually her. The photographer had wanted something glossy and corporate, but Kayla had insisted on shooting in an actual restaurant with her team beside her. That felt more real. The article inside told the whole story. Robert's quiet observations, the shocking inheritance, the family's attempted sabotage, and the remarkable turnaround she'd led over the past year. Whitmore Holdings was now 54 restaurants across 7 states, 7 new locations opened in 12 months, all in underserved communities. Profits were up 42% year over year. Employee turnover had dropped 65%. Customer satisfaction scores were at an all-time high. But the statistics Kayla was most proud of weren't in the magazine. 37 employees had been promoted from within in the past year. Wages had increased by an average of 18% across all positions. The company had implemented a profit-sharing program that made every employee a stakeholder in success. Paid family leave, comprehensive health care, tuition reimbursement for employees pursuing education. That magazine makes you look way too serious, Rosa said from the doorway. Kayla looked up and grinned. Rosa, her old co-worker from Cafe Aurora, now managed the catering division of Whitmore Holdings, a new department Kayla had created specifically to utilize Rosa's organizational genius. They kept telling me to look executive, Kayla said. I tried to smile, but the photographer said it looked too friendly. God forbid you look friendly. Rosa laughed. She came in and sat down without being asked, the kind of casual comfort that Kayla insisted on cultivating. She never wanted her office to feel intimidating. I came to remind you about tomorrow. Tomorrow was the 1-year anniversary of Robert's death. Kayla had planned something special. I haven't forgotten, she said softly. The next morning, Kayla stood outside Cafe Aurora at 7:30 a.m. The little restaurant looked exactly the same as it had a year ago. Wim had refused to sell it to her. Some things aren't for sale, he'd said, but he'd agreed to let her plan this event. One by one, people arrived. Linda, Marcus, Sophia, James, Dr. Hamilton. Dozens of Whitmore Holdings employees, many of whom had never met Robert but understood what he'd meant. Former employees Robert had hired years ago who'd been forced out but were now working for the company again in better positions. They filled the small cafe to capacity and spilled out onto the sidewalk. Kayla had arranged for coffee and breakfast for everyone, black coffee and whole wheat toast. Robert's order, served to everyone who wanted it. At exactly 7:30, Kayla stood near table 7 and raised her cup. A year ago, man died who most of the world never knew. He was wealthy, but he dressed modestly. He was successful, but he never bragged. He built a company that employed thousands, but he spent his mornings in a small cafe where nobody treated him like he was special. She looked around at all the faces, black, white, Latinx, Asian, young, old. Every kind of person Robert had believed deserved a chance. Robert Whitmore taught me that worth isn't about what you have or where you came from. It's about how you treat people when nobody's watching. How you build something that matters beyond your own benefit. How you use whatever power you have to lift others up instead of pushing them down. Her voice wavered slightly. He trusted me with his life's work. Not because I was the most qualified, I wasn't. Not because I was the smartest, I'm not. But because I was kind to him. Because I saw him as a human being. And that was enough for him to bet everything on me. She raised her cup higher. I promise you, Robert, wherever you are, I won't let you down. This company will be what you dreamed it could be. A place where everyone is valued, where success means something beyond profit, where human dignity is never sacrificed for shareholder returns. To Robert, she said. To Robert, the crowd echoed, voices mixing and rising into the morning air. Later, after the memorial, after the tears and stories and laughter of people remembering a man who'd touched more lives than he'd ever known, Kayla found herself alone at table 7. She sat in Robert's seat, drinking black coffee she'd made herself. Looking out the window at the morning traffic, for just a moment, she let herself imagine she was that young waitress again, and Robert was about to walk through the door. What would she tell him if she could? that she'd been terrified every single day for the first 6 months, that she'd cried herself to sleep wondering if she was destroying everything he'd built, that there were moments she wanted to walk away from the pressure, the responsibility, the weight of so many people depending on her, but also that she'd discovered something she didn't know existed inside her: self-strength, capability, leadership, not the kind taught in business schools, but the kind forged from caring deeply and refusing to give up, that she'd learned she was enough. Not despite being a waitress, but because being a waitress had taught her things no MBA program ever could. About people, about service, about dignity in all its forms. "Thank you," she whispered to the empty chair across from her. "Thank you for seeing me." Her phone buzzed. A text from Sophia. "New menu ready for taste testing. Think Robert would have loved the mofongo." Kayla smiled. The work was never done. There were always new challenges, new opportunities, new people to serve and support. She stood up, leaving a $2 tip under her coffee cup, Robert's amount, and walked out of Cafe Aurora into the bright morning. The story could have ended in so many ways. With her failure, broken by the pressure and her own inexperience. With her corruption, seduced by money and power into becoming what she'd despised. With her revenge, destroying the Whitmores completely, and proving she could be just as ruthless as they'd been. Instead, it ended with something simpler and more radical. Proof that kindness was not weakness, that people from overlooked communities had just as much potential as those born to privilege, that a black waitress from a struggling neighborhood could build something extraordinary when given the chance. The world was full of Robert Whitmores, people of wealth and influence who controlled resources and opportunities. And the world was full of Kayla Santoses, people of talent and integrity who never got those chances because of how they looked or where they came from. This story was proof that when those two kinds of people found each other, when privilege recognized worth and worth received opportunity, something powerful happened, something that changed lives and built legacies worth more than money could measure. 3 years later, Whitmore Holdings would expand to 14 states with 89 locations. 5 years later, Kayla would start a foundation, providing business mentorship and startup capital to women of color in the restaurant industry. 10 years later, 3 of her mentees would have their own successful restaurants, and 2 would be teaching hospitality management at universities. But all of that started here, at table 7, with black coffee and wheat toast. With an old man's quiet observation and a young woman's simple kindness, the doorbell at Cafe Aurora rang as Kayla stepped outside. Another customer entering, starting their morning, unaware that this unassuming little restaurant had been the birthplace of something extraordinary. Kayla looked back one last time at table 7 through the window. Empty now, waiting for the next person who needed a place to belong. "Rest well, Robert," she said softly. "I've got it from here." And she did. We've reached the end of Kayla's journey from a waitress wiping down tables to a CEO building a legacy. Her story is proof that character matters more than credentials, that kindness is power, and that when someone truly sees your worth, it can change everything. If this story moved you, if Kayla's courage inspired you, if Robert's faith in humanity restored yours, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Subscribe to True Justice for more stories that prove dignity always wins over prejudice. And share your thoughts in the comments. What part of Kayla's story hit you the hardest? What would you have done in her shoes? I read every comment. And your perspective matters. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for believing that stories like this need to be told. Until next time, this is True Justice reminding you that your worth is not determined by other people's limitations of you. It's determined by who you choose to be when given the chance.